Hi, Anna.
Good afternoon. For the record, Anna Moss, CWCB Finance Staff. I am here to do items 26 and 27. So item 26 is the final consideration for the storage water plan grants. So you have two requests, both of which you heard up in Walden. So the first one, 26A, is City of Walsenburg to enlarge City Lake Dam. That's an $804,000 request. And the second one, 26B, is from the Colorado River Water Conservation District for West Divide Yield Project. That's more of a study project to look at the yield in that particular basin before they move forward with any construction plans to make sure they could actually fill potential Kindig Reservoir. So with that, you had mentioned in Walsenburg that you'd like to hear from the applicant, and I'll give you a little bit further background just to refresh your memories on this. Back in July, the city came in for a loan to rehab City Lake Dam and also do some enlargement work. And then they applied for the water plan grant for the $804,000, which is the cost to do that actual enlargement to get another 120 acre feet. And so at the time, there was some conversations. This is back in Walden in September. At the time, there was some conversations between the city of Walsenburg, the Horfno County Water Conservancy District, who had recently wrapped up a study looking at storage in the basin, and they wanted that additional storage be made available to other members of the collaborative. And so things were still in the works. So over the last few months, we've worked extensively on this, lots of conversations, try to figure out a way that we could make this work. Originally, there was suggested language that said that the additional space would be made available to members of the collaborative at a reasonable price and reasonable terms, which is all fine, but that was hard for me to administer, and I didn't want us to be the judge of what was reasonable. And so we came up with new language on the condition, and I do need to make an amendment to my condition here. I reference item 26B. It should actually be 26A on the memo, so I apologize for that, but I'll get that changed in the final version. But effectively, the condition says that before we execute a grant contract, the city of Walsenburg will have an IGA with members of the collaborative. Specifically, we wanted Horfno County Water Conservancy District on that agreement that they could use that enlarged space. And so in talking with the city and the district, they thought they could probably work this out in the next couple of weeks. And just to kind of put some firm sideboards on this to make sure that we're using this water plan grant monies quickly and getting real storage projects going. We put a fairly tight timeline on this, and they think they can achieve this, but effectively we wanted that IGA within the next 4 months. And if it's not done by the end of the year, we'd like to have an update from the applicant, just giving us a status report of where they are. So in light of that, I did receive new letters of support from both Horfno County Water Conservancy District and the Arkansas Basin Roundtable. I put those on your chairs over lunch. And the district did want to amend my recommendation slightly to include other signatories to that IGA, rather than just being the Horfno County Water Conservancy District. They also wanted to add the town of Levita and the Cacharas Sanitation and Water District. And in part, it's because the collaborative is actually about 20 members in the basin that was looking at optimal storage. These are the members of the collaborative that could most likely use this space. Geographically, they're the nearest locations to that reservoir. So with that, I'm going to let the folks from the city say a few words about the project too.
Any questions of Anna up to this point? I don't believe so. Welcome. If you could just introduce yourself, if you would, please.
I'm James Acker, Mayor of Walsenburg. I've been the mayor for 4 years and on for another 2. I got elected in last week. I'd like to thank you all for hearing this. And I know it's been a long, hard battle. We've been trying to get this where municipalities, and I know this money is public money, so I believe that it's part of our obligation to help Levita, the Cachara, salmon, them in that area. The biggest concern that we've had was if we have private owners and that kind of stuff, that I'm going to charge them the same rate as I do a municipality and stuff. But we're working through those guidelines. I have our water attorney, our water engineer, and I think we're almost at that point now where we're in agreement with what we need to do and get that contract the IGA written up. So,
any questions for James? Thank you for being here. Director Goble.
That's not really a question, but just a few comments. This really is, I think, a good project that'll bring new storage to an area with a dire need for additional storage. And with the dam having to be repaired and basically replaced anyway, it makes financial sense to add this additional storage now. And it has been kind of a tough process, but I encourage Walsenburg and the rest of the members of the Storage Collaborative to work together collaboratively in a timely manner to secure this grant funding and bring this project to fruition. We have, as long as this, I guess, assuming this passes, we'll have a deadline now. And so look forward to seeing progress be made. But also I appreciate you coming up, and also Scott King is back there. And I also appreciate him coming up to represent their groups. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. Any other further questions for James? Thanks for making the trip today. We appreciate it. Now we're a little bit.
We're going to the second one.
Yes. Let's go to 26B, if we could, please.
So I don't really have any additional information on 26B other than it's that Colorado River Water Conservation District for the West Divide Yield Project. We're looking for a 50-50 match on that to install some gauging stations to look at the yield in that basin prior to doing further construction plans for that project. So staff is in support of that, and you've got the recommendation in your memo.
Great. We have staff recommendation on both A and B, and go from there. Director Goebel.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And I move to approve staff recommendation for agenda items 26A and 26B, including the staff's amended recommendation for 26A to include those 2 additional signatories to the future IGA.
Been moved by Director Goebel, second by Director McLeod. The motion has been read into the record. Further discussion? Call for the vote. All those in favor signify by an aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. 27A.
Thank you again, Anna Moss, for the record. So this is initial consideration for the storage water plan grants. So with that approval you just did, we have $2.1 million available in that fund. And so this request is from the city of Brighton. It's a $700,000 request for a $3.5 million project. So it's about 20% of the project cost. So the city of Brighton has some existing gravel pits. It's called their Erger's Augmentation Station, and they can't effectively use those pits right now. So with this grant, what they intend to do is install some pump stations and some pipelines so they can augment off of the South Platte to get water in and out of these gravel pits. So it would effectively add about 1,800 acre feet as storage into their plan. Right now, they would only be able to fill it during times of free river or, during spring runoff or high water years. But they've got it included already in a plan for augmentation. It looks like a great project from my perspective. So gladly answer questions if you have any.
Questions for Anna? Seeing none, I believe 27A has passed its initial review. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's move to 28. A, B, and C. Hey, Greg, how are you?
Afternoon. Greg Johnson, Water Supply Planning Section, CWCB staff. Agenda item 28, we have items A through C. As Anna and Brent and others have noted, this were the items that were initially considered at the September board meeting, all of which were recommended a level of grant funding in the amounts indicated on the table. So all 3 of these were for the amounts stated, being for letter A, which is the South Metro WISE Authority, application for the WISE Binney connection with a grant amount recommended at $80,000. For letter B, the Central Colorado Water Conservancy District for the Walker Ranch Recharge Project with a recommended grant amount of $750,000. And then finally for letter C, the Conejos Water Conservancy District for the Conejos Cooperative Project with a recommended grant amount of $158,051. We went through a little more detail on these projects, of course, at the initial meeting in September. We'll give you a very quick summary, and I'm happy to answer any questions, go into any more details on these if needed. The South Metro WISE Authority for the Wise-Binney connection. This is something that many board members are probably more familiar with this week after the tour down there. But an integral part of the project for the WISE Authority. This would involve a connection between the WISE distribution system and Aurora's water system as it was anticipated in the water delivery agreement that would allow a higher flow and really free up system capacity in Aurora Water's system. It would also add the ability for Aurora to provide treated, unblended water from the Prairie Waters project to Denver Water through the WISE Authority distribution system. And the project's really focusing on the feasibility study to evaluate how that connection will be made, as well as the alignment study for where that connection will go, and involving the booster pump stations as well, about 5 miles long for that pipeline. For the Walker Ranch Recharge Project for the Central Colorado Water Conservancy District, this is a very large project which already has funding procured from the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. The ask here was originally for $1 million due to all the competition for funds. We had a number of discussions back and forth and have settled on a staff recommendation of $750,000. This is a water supply retiming project that allows Central to retime their excess flows, their excess recharge accretions that they have, along with a new junior water right of 100 CFS. It could provide up to 30,000 acre feet of augmentation water supplies, but they anticipate that the firm yield is about 7,500 to 10,000 acre feet per year, which would eliminate the need to buy senior water and dry up an estimated 5,000 to 20,000 acres of irrigated farmland. And then, surprisingly, it is extremely cost effective, as well as, of course, being high yield, with a firm annual yield cost of about $1,500 to $2,000 per acre foot. And then finally, for the Conejos Cooperative Project for the Conejos Water Conservancy District, this is a very interesting project looking at a number of different issues down in the Conejos Basin. It would implement and expand on the recommendations of the Trujillo Meadows ATM project and investigate opportunities for the development of additional storage and coordinated water operations in the basin down there. One of the potential options is an enlargement of the Trujillo Meadows Reservoir, as well as potential construction of new storage on the San Antonio River upstream of Antonito. So the project involves analyzing a number of different factors and looking at coordinated operations with the Platoro Reservoir as well. And I would turn it over to Director Dutton if we need to discuss any other details on this, as she knows that area very well. So those are the three that were discussed again at the September meeting for the initial consideration and before you for final consideration today.
Questions for Greg? I believe we have staff recommendation. Director Yon.
I would move staff recommendation on items 28A through C.
By Director Yon. I'm sorry, I didn't catch it. Second by Director Dutton to move staff recommendations on agenda item 28A, B, and C. Further discussion? Call for the vote. All those in favor signify by an aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Down to agenda item 28.
Great.
I'm sorry, 29.
Then agenda item 29, Greg Johnson, again, CWCB staff for the record. Agenda item 29, this also has letters A through C. 3 new applications were received to the water supply and demand gap projects category. These, of course, for initial consideration before the board today. I should mention we also had a 4th application that we worked with the applicant on. The applicant had also applied for additional funds through the agricultural funding category. So Brent Newman had discussed those, or that project in particular, prior to lunch today. This particular phase that they'd applied for these funds was not as good of a fit after some discussion back and forth. So we worked with the applicant, recommended withdrawal of that application, which they agreed to. Phase 3, and then Brent's project this morning focused on phase 1. Also wanted to just briefly mention that particular project, I believe, is seeking funding from the Water Supply Reserve Fund, so it will likely be coming back around as well in that venue. The other main thing to note with this funding category is that the 3 projects I just mentioned for agenda item 28 A through C that were just approved for final approval. Those totaled $988,051. This particular funding category for the water plan grant funds has $2 million that was appropriated per the project's bill last year. So that left, prior to that or after that agenda item previously, that left a little over $1 million. With these three applications that are for initial consideration today, we would have about $365,000 left if they were to be approved in the January meeting. So we have the three applications. We are recommending funding for the full amounts at the levels indicated, and I will go through those in a minute. So again, that would leave about $365,000 in this funding category. Like most of these funding categories, I believe all funding categories, we do have additional notice of intents to apply. So we do anticipate having applications for that February 1st deadline for the final round of funding this year. So the three applications we have, letter A is the Town of Firestone, the Water Activity Enterprise, for a project titled the Modeling Reservoir Operations for Direct Reuse. Application was for $71,500, and staff supports it at this amount. Application letter B was from the Aurora Colorado Springs Joint Water Authority, and this was for the Homestake Arkansas River Diversion Improvement Project. This request was for $500,000, and staff does support it at that level. And then finally, application letter C for the St. Charles Mesa Water District, the long-term potable water supply to the Zeno subdivision for $75,000, and staff does support it at the $75,000 level. Go into a brief description on each of these. The Town of Firestone Water Activity Enterprise. This project involves modeling reservoir operations for direct reuse. So this was actually coming in asking for funds from this funding category, the water supply and demand, as well as the land use and conservation. Based on our discussion, Kirk had presented this today and previously, but we have decided at a staff level to really focus on one funding category for primarily logistical reasons. But this is a great project that really does have a lot of conservation and reuse components to it. So Firestone is really seeking to reuse their Windy Gap return flows. This ties again back to earlier agenda item today with the development of Windy Gap. And they were directly planning to pipe that effluent from the St. Vrain Sanitation District wastewater treatment plant to the Firestone Reservoir and or other reservoirs that they may build or acquire. So this would allow recapturing and exchanging reusable water that's really a critical portion of their supply. So they have a goal of actually reusing water that they have available through Windy Gap, as well as NISP and other augmentation credits that they have to meet 25% of their demand in the year 2047. So they're doing everything they can to use every last drop. The Homestake Arkansas River Diversion Improvement Project is also another interesting project. This ask is again for $500,000. This particular project is also coming in for a subsequent application under the environmental and recreational component for water plan grant funding. This is the main diversion off of the Arkansas River for the Homestake project. My understanding is it was built in the 1960s. With the project, it was operated extensively as a main diversion, and then in the 1980s, when they extended their intake to Turquoise, I believe from Turquoise to Twin Lakes, I don't know the system well enough. This diversion was not used nearly as much as it had been in the past. I believe they still operate the structure, but it has really fallen into deterioration. So this project would rehab that entire structure and really focus on adding additional improvements to the structure to convey this water that they need, as well as to have boat passage and fish passage components as well. So this project specifically for the water supply and demand gap project is attractive because it would enable them to operate certain exchanges that they have. One in particular that the city of Colorado Springs has, Colorado Springs Utilities, that would exchange up to 20,000 acre feet annually through that structure. And this would also likely be in conjunction with ATMs operating through the Pueblo Reservoir and exchanging all the way up to this diversion structure. They have done many different analyses of exchange potential and other feasibility studies on this particular structure. Exchange potential is actually quoted at about 32,000 acre feet annually, so the potential is there to get this water up there. And then finally, letter C, the St. Charles Mesa Water District, the long-term potable water supply to the Zeno subdivision. This is one that the board is familiar with somewhat. I believe they have Water Supply Reserve Fund to the project. They are leveraging money from DOLA and from another number of other places. The project is actually in excess of $1 million. So this application would really help round out the project for an additional $75,000. This particular subdivision, located, I believe, adjacent to or maybe even completely within the boundaries of Pueblo, has a very inadequate water supply. They have some shallow wells and very poor infrastructure that has led to many interruptions in service. So this would allow them to tie on to the St. Charles Mesa Water District system and be a part of that district. They're actually being annexed into the St. Charles Mesa Water District, and as well as getting all the additional infrastructure put in. And staff does support that application as well at the $75,000 request amount.
Questions for Director Hawkins?
Thanks, Greg. I had a question about the Aurora Colorado Springs Joint Water Authority project. And it's really a question about this and agenda item 31A. Is it the same match being used for both applications?
Yes, that's my understanding, and it's a significant project. I believe it's about $7 million. Yeah. So I believe it is the same match.
Might be some number discrepancies somewhere because the applicant match does not match between the two info sheets,
Gotcha. Okay.
but they're similar. So
Okay.
it wasn't quite clear to me reading these sheets exactly how all of this funding would come together, and that might be helpful to see.
Yeah, that's a good point. We can follow up on that. We have had a number of calls on this particular project, and I know they are leveraging the funding from CPW, for the boat shoot. And I do not know exactly how those numbers together. We were honestly a little bit confused with the discrepancies between the two applications and how they tied together. So good to know. The other main thing I forgot to note on this one is that the Arkansas Headwaters Recreation Area is fairly excited about it. Apparently, it's the only main blockage between Leadville and Pueblo Reservoir. So they're excited to get this improved. Sure.
Further questions of Greg? My question at this point in time, are you satisfied, Director Hawkins, on 29B? Yes. All right. If there are no further questions, I would have the record reflect that agenda item 29A, B, and C has passed its initial review then. Thanks, Craig. Let's move to agenda item number 30.
Bessie with the Stream and Lake Protection Section. We are bringing you 4 Environment and Recreation Water Plan grants for final consideration today. The first one, 30A, is an application by Denver Botanic Gardens for the South Platte River Restoration Planning and Feasibility Study. This project, Denver Botanic Gardens would work in partnership with Jefferson County to conduct a feasibility study and develop a restoration plan for streams located on Jefferson County open space properties. This project will result in a final report and specific plan for those 2 entities to restore portions of streams in the South Platte Basin that are on open space property. So this project will provide a foundation to move forward with the restoration work. And staff is recommending that the board approve a grant in the amount of $69,847 for this project. 30B is an application of Trout Unlimited for the Needle Rock Ditch Diversion Modification. This project entails modifying the Needle Rock Ditch diversion structure on Smith Fork Creek in Delta County to enable fish to pass upstream over the diversion. And it would reconnect 2 miles of that creek with the upstream portion of the creek. The second part of the project is to install a remotely monitored stream gauge at the diversion structure, which will help with water administration issues in the area. We received a letter of support from the Gunnison Basin Roundtable for this project on November 7th. I believe was sent to the Dropbox for the board members. and staff is supporting a water plant grant in the amount of $20,000 for this project. Agenda item 30C is another application by Trout Unlimited for the Windy Gap Reservoir Bypass Project. And you're pretty familiar with the Windy Gap firming project. And this is the bypass channel that would restore 1 mile of the Colorado River that is currently inundated by Windy Gap Reservoir. Will have a lot of environmental and recreational benefits. And as you know, the project has a lot of partners. And staff is recommending a water plan grant in the amount of $325,237. That is reduced from the original request of $1,950,000. That would have been for design and construction of the channel. And this increment of funding that staff is recommending would cover the final design. So we have another one, but agenda item 30D, when we talked about it in September, the board requested the applicant to come in and talk to the board. So I spoke with our chair and we thought it might be good to take care of these first three and then move on to 30D.
Appropriate. Let's do exactly that. Staff recommendations on agenda items 30A, B, and C. Director Yon.
I would move staff recommendations on agenda items 38, B, and C.
Director Yon, second by Director Hawkins, to move staff recommendations on agenda item 30A, B, and C. Further discussion? Call for the vote. All those in favor signify by an aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Agenda item 30D is an application by American Whitewater for a project called Assessing Non-Consumptive Recreational Needs and Opportunities in the Rio Grande River Basin. Under this project, American Whitewater would coordinate with the Rio Grande Basin Roundtable and local stakeholders on conducting recreational flow preference studies on priority river reaches in the Rio Grande Basin and updating and completing a boatable days study that American Whitewater conducted in 2015. Since the September board meeting, Nathan Fay of American Whitewater met with Basin Roundtable members to discuss the project. And we received a letter of support from that Basin Roundtable on October 24th that should be in your Dropbox files. And this work will fold into the Basin Roundtable's stream management planning efforts. And staff is recommending a grant in the amount of $39,200. But Nathan Fay is here to address the board and answer questions and give a short presentation on the methodology. So I'm going to fire up this PowerPoint.
Nathan.
Afternoon, Nathan Fay with American Whitewater. It's on. Well, bear with me. Yeah, good afternoon, Nathan Fay with American Whitewater again. Thanks for the opportunity. We have been really scrambling to put together these grant requests and scopes of work to help complete some of the missing data and data gaps that have been identified in the state water plan for several basins. So what I did here this afternoon at Linda's request was throw together a quick deck of slides. And what I'll try to do is just summarize how we're relating this to both the overall Colorado water plan, but also specifically to the Rio Grande's VIP. And then I'll run through our study approach, again, at Linda's request. And if I've got a little bit of time, I'll give you a couple of examples of outputs, both from our flow evaluation work, but also from this boatable days assessment that we've recently developed. We can work with that. So I've covered already the general scope of our proposed project, but the thing that I definitely want to emphasize here is that we're not doing this work to establish any sort of new water rights. Thanks, gentlemen. And we certainly, our intent is certainly not to diminish any conditional or firm water rights. Our attempt here is to fill in some of the data gaps that have been identified in the state water plan. And we're doing that with a study approach that we've been developing for probably 3 or 4 decades, but we've recently adapted to address water supply planning rather than hydropower relicensing, which is where most of this methodology was developed. So real quickly, statewide water plan goals consistently say we want to support development of multiple purpose projects. We have data gaps of dealing with especially in-stream flow goals for ecological and recreational values. And then, a constant theme that we've picked up on is this desire to quantify numeric flow recommendations for enviro and rec values, which is great because our years of work in the hydropower industry has given us a specific tool set that I think we can apply here. And that's what we're trying to do with the Rio Grande. So the Rio Grande's BIP has also been very explicit on supporting development of projects that have multiple purposes, including environmental and recreational needs. And goal 14 specifically, mentions maintaining and enhancing water-dependent recreational activities. And when I read a statement like that, my next immediate question is, okay, how? What are we going to measure? What metrics are we going to consider if we are trying to make a judgment on maintaining or enhancement? So, in the sake of time, I'm going to skip a couple of background slides here and get right to our methodology. For the record, we have been doing some of this work around the state with a watershed flow evaluation tool, with the Arkansas Roundtable, with the Colorado Basin Roundtable, and some other much more focused stream management planning efforts. And I think some of that is captured and reflected by the recommendations from SWASI 2010 and the Non-Consumptive Needs Assessment Toolbox. Both of those have identified our study approach as being one of the preferred tools that can assess recreational needs, and has also provided some example measurable outcomes. So we have a couple of tasks that are included in the Rio Grande request here. And the first one, of course, is we will coordinate with Heather and her group and the roundtable in general, including stakeholders. So the roundtable is really driving this work. We have approached the roundtable and approached Director Dutton with kind of an offer to assist. Some of the stream management planning work has already done some assessment of recreational boatable days. And Director Dutton and I have talked about ways that we can work together to improve that data set and make it really useful for the roundtable specifically. Task 2 in our request is to obviously focus in on priority recreational segments in the basin. So not specifically whitewater in terms of splash and giggle, kayaking with family-friendly floating, float boat fishing, anything that's supported by boating and paddling opportunities. We also maintain the national database of recreational rivers, and in our database we have 4 segments within the roundtable, within the basin itself listed. And so task 2 of our project is to continue to work with the roundtable to either eliminate some of these reaches that might be a little bit less common, like Treasure Creek, but we've also had discussions already about expanding our scope to include lower sections of the Rio Grande main stem between Alamosa and the state line. And there are some, maybe some additional resources or attributes that we could include into the scope of work without any adjustment to the budget. So how do we get there? The first thing is to define flows that support recreation. And this graphic is about 40 years old, so it's starting to deteriorate. I'm sorry for the quality there. This is a peer-reviewed and published study approach. This flow evaluation curve represents the data that we've collected and organized to identify low flows that support recreation. So there's a point where recreation can no longer be supported, right? The flows are just too low. In some river segments or sections, the river characteristics would imply that there could be a point where the water is too high. So we try to identify this range, and frequently the range is very large. And using this example, we have to trust that 375 CFS provides a much different recreational experience and higher or different recreational quality than something like 1,000 CFS. So as we talk about providing recreational needs, it's very hard to specify a flow. It's also very difficult to assume that we'll get the full range in every type of year. So task 3, after we've collected all of this information and have some very clearly defined flow thresholds for types of recreation, then we want to assess this based on year type. So we run a statistical analysis, given whatever period of record we've decided on with the roundtable in this case, and defined low, dry typical, wet and wet year types. And we found this very useful because some of my table is not coming through here. We would expect that there's no reason for the recreational community or resource managers to try to provide the same quality recreation in terms of flows in a dry year type as we would expect in a wet year type. So we've broken this down by year type to make it much more useful for resource managers, but also accurate in recognizing variability in the system, and setting realistic thresholds depending on how the data is going to be used by the roundtable. So going through, so let me give you a couple examples here real quick. This is a quick snapshot that we did several years ago comparing our flow data against the Platte and Colorado simulation model from Denver Water. This was actually used in the Upper Colorado Wild and Scenic Stakeholders process several years ago. The point here really is, I'm afraid I'm going to mess this up if I push too many buttons. So this historical condition represents a period of record post-Windy Gap, so 1984 through the most recent PACSIM model, which is mid-90s, I believe. I forget the date at the moment. And then assuming reasonably foreseeable projects like Moffett or Windy Gap expansion. So we've got this boatable days assessment of current conditions, and we can compare it to a model of future conditions based on the project's proponent. So this has been really useful to compare the two and identify where there may be enhancements to recreation or some impairments. So another quick example, I would go to Director Gallagher's part of the state in the Yampa. This is work that's being done right now with Aaron Wilson Water Group. So this is kind of a snapshot of recreational use across a single year, reflecting each of those flow ranges that we've been targeting for assessment. Here is a model of future conditions. So this contains the Juniper Water Conservancy District, LCAD reservoirs at maximum fish releases. And really what this just allows us to do is assume or evaluate and assess what change may be to recreational use. It may be, actually what's notable here is that future conditions actually improve recreational use by boosting the number of boatable days at this particular gauge site. Moving right along, so I think task 5 is where the real utility of our tool and this project comes into play. And we've built an analytical tool that we will run with the roundtable's input. If there's a project or a future condition that can specify a change file, so a % decrease over a period of days or a monthly time step, or a specific flow depletion on monthly or daily time step, we can run that model and again get to current conditions with a comparison of future conditions. And that information is why we're offering to do this for the roundtable. So they've got good information to first address and identify current conditions and make their own assessments of a future change and whether that's acceptable or some conversation around trade-offs needs to occur. Here's just one last example that I wanted to present. This is the boatable days run that we did for Montrose County and their consultants on their conditional storage rights on the main stem of the San Miguel. And again, here's our 15-year period of record, the 3 alternatives that were proposed by the county. We considered another 5% decrease and a 10% decrease in flow conditions in our input files. And what we found is that in most year types, there's little, if any, change. In this funny wet year type, we actually saw an increase in recreational opportunities in the form of a boatable day at this particular gauge site. So when we talk about assessing current conditions, modeling changes, often I hear people assume that the change will be a negative, it'll be a decrease. So one of the reasons we're doing this work is to kind of challenge that assumption and prove that there are opportunities to do some enhancements and again, kind of deliver on some of the expectations of the state water plan. And the proverbial recreational image.
Questions for Nathan? Great presentation. Thank you very much. Excellent. Linda, do you have other comments?
Recommendation that the board approve a water plant grant for this project in the amount of $39,200.
Director Dutton.
Linda, thank you for explaining the project really well. And Nathan, thank you for coming in for that presentation, which I think is very helpful. We have appreciated Nathan coming down and visiting with us. And I think what I took away from our meeting with different interests in the Valley was that there are probably a lot of opportunities for us to improve recreation if we have more data. So we're excited about this project, and I move we accept staff's recommendation.
Been a motion by Director Dutton, second by Director Hawkins to move staff recommendation 30D. Further discussion? Director Hawkins.
Quick comment. I did talk to water users in my basin that have done boatable days work with American Whitewater. And I wanted to note that when it comes to looking at reservoir operations, the way that American Whitewater can differentiate between minimum, optimum, and maximum has been useful in some of our basins when we're looking at negotiating recreational and ecological and water use issues all at the same time. So it's something to think about as we're looking at this methodology.
Discussion. Call for the vote. All those in favor signify by an aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We will move to agenda item number 31.
SC Stream and Lake Protection Section. Agenda item 31 is water plan grants in the environment and recreation category. This is an informational item only. No actions required. This is the board's initial consideration. In the second round of applications, we received in the environment and recreation category, we received 6 applications totaling $706,000 and 1 intent to apply for $125,000. After we met with some of the applicants, 1 application was withdrawn and 1 was converted to an intent to apply. So we are supporting the 4 applications in the table on the board memo, which total $391,000. That leaves $154,716 available for the third round of applications. And the 9 applications that we have in the intent to apply category now total $1,125,140. So there, you can't say there's not a demand. So I will walk through these projects. We have 4 projects. They're all very different from each other, and I think they're all really good projects. The first one, 31A, is Aurora, Colorado Springs Joint Water Authority, application for the boat chute component of the Homestake Arkansas River diversion improvements that Greg talked about in agenda item, I think it was 29. So you've heard about the background of that project, and this application is solely for the boat chute component. And the project is located below the town of Granite, Colorado, and this overall, the Homestake Arkansas Diversion Improvement Project it's a multi-objective project that will reconstruct the diversion and intake to provide reliable river intake. It will provide fish passage for brown and rainbow trout, and that part of it is not requested to be funded by this grant. That part of it is being funded in the overall project funding that the applicant is matching, and we will work on the discrepancies with those numbers, and may use part of the other grant for. The project also will reduce existing risks to recreational users. The boat chute component, which is what this grant is asking for funding for, will provide improved navigability through the reach of the Arkansas between the towns of Granite and Buena Vista. Currently, boaters have to portage around the diversion, and it's the only place on the Arkansas from Leadville down that has this issue. So it will also enhance economic opportunities for commercial rafting businesses. And CPW is a financial partner on this project. And the applicant is consulted with CPW in the Arkansas River headwaters area. And it is part of an IPP that the Arkansas Basin Roundtable identified. Staff is supporting reduced funding. The initial request was for $300,000, and we are recommending that the board approve funding in January for it in the amount of $200,000. Mainly, we're just trying to stretch the funding and help as many projects as we can. But we like this project a lot because they're ready to go and build something that will have great benefits. 31B is an application by the Colorado Water Trust for the McKinley Ditch Project in the amount of $66,000. Some of you are familiar with this project and others aren't. In 2014, the Water Trust purchased 1.5 shares of water in the McKinley Ditch and conveyed to CWCB a permanent right to use those water rights for in-stream flow use under a proposed split season irrigation in-stream flow arrangement. It's the first one we've done. It's an exciting project, but it's requiring a lot of infrastructure modifications to make it work. So this requested funding is for final design and construction at the McKinley Ditch headgate to allow measurement and managing those shares to enable split season operation. So they will construct and install a new splitter box and return channel. So they'll divert and then return the in-stream flow water to the stream, install and calibrate a turnback structure, and install a data recording system. We received a letter of support from Colorado Parks and Wildlife on October 1st, and staff is recommending that in January the board approve funding for this project in the amount of $66,000. 31C is an application by Ducks Unlimited for the Wellington Wetland Enhancement and Recreation Project in the amount of $50,000. This project will restore and enhance a degraded wetland for recreation and wildlife purposes on a 50-acre parcel of private land just east of Wellington, Colorado. The landowner uses this land as a drought reserve grazing site for cattle and horses. It's subject to a no development deed restriction, so that will ensure long-term protection. We do have a letter of support from the property owner who reached out to Ducks Unlimited to get some help in enhancing these wetlands. And the issue with them is that they just have cattails, and there are a lot of other wetland plants that support wildlife. And so this project, they'll install necessary water control structures, embankments, and ditching. I'm not sure what the difference is between ditches and ditching, that allow for effective hydrology management. And what they'll do is move the water around so that some areas won't be as wet as they have been in the past, and that will allow these other wetland plants to grow, which I learned a lot in talking to the applicant about this project. So that will result in desired plant species that will be used by a variety of wildlife, particularly migrating waterfowl. So this will add wildlife values to a key property that is surrounded by existing public lands on multiple sides, and so that will result in some habitat connectivity. It will also provide additional recreation opportunities in partnership with CPW. And then even after this project, the property can also be still used as an emergency grazing area during drought, but it would not be used for this purpose during the key waterfowl migrating periods when they would be using the wetland. So staff is recommending that in January, the board approve funding for this project in the amount of $50,000. The fourth project,
Director
yes.
McLeod.
I asked you about this before, Linda, but I couldn't find any information in the materials about public access to these wetlands. I see that adjacent to public lands, but will there be any public access for, I guess, duck hunting is the question on this property, or is this a private enterprise?
There will be limited public access. The landowner is interested in allowing access for hunting to youth, disabled people, and veterans. And so I think they will work with CPW to make that happen. And that would be for duck hunting.
Okay, well, I'd like to make sure that that's part of the program. So when you come back with your final recommendation, I'd like to make sure we have that addressed.
About that plan, do you want the applicant to come in, or?
I don't think that's necessary, as long as you can get CPW or put it in the application.
Okay.
Concerned about funding projects on private property.
Dr. Staub.
Thank you. Along those same lines, and the period of time, is there life expectancy of this project that they're going to allow limited public access, or is it a 10-year, 5-year, 2-month type of access for the public? That'd be helpful to know. I know you may not.
I will find out the answers to these questions and bring them back to you in January.
Well, if you think the best way to explain it is have the applicant come, that's up to you, but
Okay.
it wouldn't be necessary.
Okay. I'll look into it and see what the best way is to address it.
Further questions for Linda on that? I don't believe so.
The last one is 31D. It's an application by Trout Unlimited for the Lower Tomichi Water Conservation Project. The request was for $150,000, and staff is supporting a reduced amount of $75,000. This would be a 3-year water conservation project that will involve regional coordination to improve environmental and recreational flows through the Tomichi State Wildlife Area and reduce agricultural shortages below the state wildlife area. This is intended to demonstrate how temporary and coordinated split-season agricultural water conservation can provide flexibility necessary to sustain both robust agriculture and healthy streams in the Upper Gunnison Basin. The way it will work is that participating water rights would reduce irrigation, or water users, I should say, will reduce irrigation withdrawals from the stream during critical times, which will benefit stream flows through the state wildlife area, satisfy downstream water rights, and potentially prevent a basin-wide call. The funding under this grant would be used to reach out to landowners and pay them to enroll in the program at a base rate of $20 per acre as an incentive to enroll for 3 years, and then to compensate the participants for reduced consumptive use of water. With rates to be negotiated, they're expected to be between $150 to $180 per acre foot. Project is intended to address environmental and recreational needs while preserving existing agricultural uses. Trout Unlimited also is going to be applying for system conservation pilot program funding for this project, and it's the type of project that fits into that program. So staff is recommending that in January, the board approve a grant in the amount of $75,000.
Director Hawkins.
Disclose to the board that my employer for my day job, the Nature Conservancy, has filed a letter of support and may be a project participant in this project, which again is item 31D.
Further questions for Linda? Hearing none, and let the record reflect Director Hawkins' statements to agenda item number 31. At this point in time, agenda item 31 is A, B, C, and D have passed their initial review. So, thank you. At this time, we're scheduled for a short break. We are about 40 minutes ahead of schedule.
Nothing's wrong with that.
What's the board's pleasure? Do you want a break, or you want to knock a couple more out?
Yeah, let's knock a couple more out.
We're going to knock a couple more.
Yeah, there's a sign that says we can't, do not break the plastic until 3 p.m.
Okay. Well, with that in mind, we will knock a couple more out. Sorry, audience, we're going to sit here for a while. Let's go to agenda item number 32.
Dire warning on that plastic. I wouldn't touch that. So, good afternoon. Kevin Reedy, for the record, CWCB staff, water supply planning section. Right now, I've got a couple items here, 32A and B, and these are for your final consideration that were from the September board meeting. The first one, 32A, Dominion Water and Sanitation District regional factors for precipitation harvesting, and 32B, Peak Spatial Enterprises and Chambers Economic Analysis, Water Information and Real Estate Disclosure Tool. So just to kind of refresh your memory for these two items, Dominion is the water supplier for Sterling Ranch, which is being built out now in Douglas County. And so basically this stems from House Bill 15-1016, which was primarily to incentivize any other additional precipitation harvesting pilot programs that came along to incentivize them to kind of come into it because of the requirement for substitute water supply plans for these kind of projects. And so since their Dominion and Sterling Ranch is our first and only participant in the rainwater harvesting pilot project, it seemed like a pretty good fit that they could come in with the data they've collected so far, which I believe is on 6th, 7th year. And so they've been collecting data on that site. Initially, Division of Water Resources and CWCB have gone in on this project. And House Bill 15-1016 kind of says, hey, state, we want you to come up forward and create these regional factors to help folks come in and do these substitute water supply plans a little easier. And with that, it'll make it a little easier to come into the program. So basically what they want to do is just summarize the legal framework along with this, provide clarity and guidance on this to the state and from the state on how these precipitation harvesting will be administered. And also to create this regional approach so that we can export this across the state. So it's a way to create a methodology that will work in other places when somebody wants to come forward. They want to go through all the brain damage to come up with this. And we're going to have real data from the site itself to supplement this. And I'd have Kevin say anything if he wants to add anything, Kevin Ryan.
Sure. Thank you, Kevin. And I would just like to address the board that my staff and I have worked with Dominion on a couple occasions to go over this data that they've collected over the years and this task that really the board has before it to develop the regionally applicable factors. Dominion has the data, Dominion and their consultant, they have the expertise and they're very much engaged in the approach to this. So I think it's a very worthwhile effort.
Like me to continue with the second one or?
Let's stop there. We have staff recommendation on agenda item 32A. Let's address that one. And then we have other folks that are here for 32B.
So staff recommendation is to approve Dominion's application for the amount of $54,000 as it stands. It hasn't changed since the last board meeting.
Dr. Yon.
Thank you. I'm well known for getting nervous about precipitation harvesting, but but this is the right direction when you're having a new development and nobody's relying on the historic return flows and all of that, that this is the time to do things like this. So I'm looking forward to what comes out of this. So I appreciate moving forward on this. So with that, I would move staff recommendation on item 32A. Is that right?
Motion by Director Yon, second by Director Goebel to move staff recommendation 32A. Further discussion? Call for the vote. All those in favor signify by an aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, great. On to 32B, water information, real estate disclosure. And I've got a couple folks in the audience who can help answer any questions if the board has any. Sean Chambers and Royal Capsule, who are putting together this project. Basically what it is a way to pull together information ahead of time when a home buyer is looking for a home. They would like to do a pilot project up along the Front Range. And there's something like, in north of 50,000 home transactions that happen every year. And so the idea is to kind of open some transparency here, get the information into folks' hands ahead of time. And so they can kind of see what the water situation is where they want to buy their house. But specifically looking at a lot of the water efficiency aspects and see if the local utility has a water conservation plan in place, or what kind of projects they're thinking about doing. And it would be an online tool. I just heard from these guys today about how the county assessor for, is it El Paso County? Yeah, El Paso County was very interested in this. They just talked to them just the other day about how they would love to have this information on their own website as well. And we do have from our House Bill 101051 database, the annual reporting bill that water providers have to send into the CWCB every June 30th with water use and water conservation data. There would be a way to hook that in as well so that they can get some real-time data, snapshot each year, and help populate this idea. But for me, it's really about a transparency and openness to say, hey, here's what we're doing. And also to say, hey, if you don't, if a plan doesn't show up, it doesn't mean that they're not doing anything. It's to kind of, we want to have that kind of disclaimer as well. It's just saying, because not everybody's required to have a plan. Conservation plan, or they might be doing something there. So it would be a way to kind of pull in other people maybe in this as well. And they've just gotten, since the last time you guys saw, they've gotten 4 more letters of support from Colorado Springs Chamber and Economic Development Organization, Colorado Springs Utility, El Paso County Commissioner Gonzalez, and Pikes Peak Regional Water Authority as well. So with that.
Questions for Kevin at this point in time? I don't believe so. Sean Royal, would you like to speak? All right. Director Goebel.
Chairman, I'm not sure if this question is for you, Kevin, or Sean, but I guess my question is, what's the incentive for a real estate agent to want to show this? I mean, if they're selling a piece of land or a home in an area that has, a good water setup, fine. But if I'm a real estate agent that's trying to make a buck and selling in an area that's not, what's the incentive to show these types of areas?
I'm going to defer to the applicant on this one. But yeah, good question. Excellent question. We've talked about this. So.
If you could maybe identify yourself, if you would, please.
Good afternoon. My name's Sean Chambers, and I'm part of the applicant team, and I'm here to speak to the question. I briefed the Pikes Peak Association of Realtors, their political action and public engagement committee on this in our process of getting a letter of support from them. And I got to tell you, around the room, there were a lot of different perspectives, and there were some realtors who were going like, hey, I sort of deal in that are maybe less than desirable in areas with maybe less than renewable water and less than well-operated local government. And I don't necessarily want transparency in my life. But the committee overwhelmingly supported the letter of support for us based on that. Overall, the committee believes in transparency. And there were a lot of, say, rural land brokers who maybe fit your example, who were saying often my client, be myself as a broker or the brokers in my office, we go out and we don't know, is it part of a groundwater management district? Is there an overlaying water provider here? We don't know where to go chase that information down. And then when we met the assessor recently, the assessor's like, we don't have technical expertise in our office to chase this info down either. And so the assessor, I think, ends up calling the state engineer's office, right? And there's an inefficiency in all that phone tag going in a circle. And I think the vision for our mapping tool in areas where there is no PWSID water provider is that it'll be a little bit binary. It'll just say there is no provider, but we'll have overlay mapping and the existence of a data set. Is there a groundwater management district? Is there a conservancy district? And what's the contact info for those parties or for the state engineer's groundwater unit? And hopefully eliminate some of that, like, well, where do I go to find this information for any parcel or property?
I think it's a good idea. I just, that was my main question. Then second question is, what's the long-term aim on a website site like this? You know, you get the initial funding and set up all the links and stuff, but what's the future?
Yeah. So, you know, as you see in the application, this project is a 2-year pilot. The pilot is reserved to a 7-county area, which we think is sort of ground zero for complicated water provider boundaries that don't neatly overlay municipal boundaries or fire district or school district boundaries. And that becomes a confusing situation, whether you're from this state or you're newly transplanted to the state. How do you figure all this stuff out? Can you restate the fundamental of the?
Basically, just what's the plan for future O&M?
So what we found is that we've built into the budget the ability to run this thing for 2 years, to update it annually, to make sure we get everyone's update to their water quality info and their rates info and these important pieces of data. But we think that there's a lot of interest from folks like the assessors and the real estate community, as well as large and small utilities, in finding a way to fund it. And we don't know if that's through some sort of authority or association that pays dues. We don't know if that's legislative. We don't know what that is. In your board packet, I think you have a letter of support from Aurora Water, whereby they suggest maybe there's a legislative nexus there. We've heard from the assessor and from real estate folks that if they find the tool to be valuable and user-friendly and it cuts down on their research capacity, that's something they'll pay for. If it simplifies their life and is an efficiency in their life, right?
Further questions for Sean? Thanks for being here today. Appreciate it.
Okay, so we have staff recommendation to fund the water information / real estate disclosure tool for the amount that's there, $60,000. And that's staff recommendation.
Director Yon.
I would move staff recommendation on item 32B.
By Director Yon, second by Director Goebel, to move agenda item or staff recommendation, agenda item 32B. Further discussion? All for the vote. All those in favor signify by an aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Yeah, let's move to agenda item 33.
Got agenda, Kevin Reedy, CWC staff for the record. Agenda items 33A through D. We've got one 33C I want to draw your attention to. This is a last minute pull, pulling it off the agenda for initial consideration at this point. There was some miscommunication between applicant and collaborators, and so they wanted to try to retool, and they said it wasn't ready for prime time at this time. So, but it unfortunately happened after the agenda was set and sent out. So I expect to probably see something like that. It's a great project. I really liked it, but we'll see if it comes back maybe for February 1st or a future date. So just wanted to draw your attention to that. So save some time here. So we've got 33A, B, and D now. I'll go through the list really quickly and then go through each one, explain them a little bit. This is for initial consideration. The Northwest 33A is Northwest Colorado Council of Governments, the QQ committee. Their project title is Water Saving Measures in Land Use Codes in the Headwaters. 33B is Water Reuse Colorado, and their project is Development of Colorado Guidelines for Direct Potable Reuse. Is from Colorado Springs Utilities, Homebuyer Landscape Outreach Program. I'll go through the 33A first. This is a really kind of a neat project, and it ties in with our land use objective from the water plan. It's for $25,500. And what they want to do is they want to go through their clients, basically, and the folks that they work for up in their jurisdiction, and go through and see, who's doing what in terms of integrating water efficiency into their land use planning, number one. And then to figure out who's doing what, how much is actually happening, which is going to help the CWCB quite a bit actually to figure out to try to assess that 2025 goal of 75% of communities or folks living in Colorado or living in communities that integrate these things together, water efficiency and land use. And then secondly, they want to develop a model code for those folks that don't have anything going on this front and create that for their members. And thirdly, they want to provide technical assistance for 5 communities in their region to incorporate or strengthen these water saving measures in their land use code as well. And again, this goes towards the goal of 75% of Coloradans living in communities that have incorporated water savings actions into land use planning. And staff supports this and hoping for approval in January. 33B, Water Reuse Colorado, development of Colorado guidelines for direct potable reuse. This is a good tie back to the water plan as well. We had an action in the water plan that called for clarifying the regulation and regulatory environment for direct potable reuse and to foster reuse development. They've got support from the Metro and South Platte roundtables for this. And also it does directly support a lot of the reuse IPMPs in the South Platte, as well as Arkansas. And let's see. So basically what they're going to do is they're working off of, there's an existing program right now that they've been developing a framework for this because there's no federal regulations for this. A number of states have done this on their own, such as California and Texas, but there's nothing on the federal level. EPA does not have anything on this. And so they really wanted to kind of take the guesswork out of for water providers to, if they wanted to go this route. And they've got several that are very interested in doing this. And what they want to do is they define the treatment and monitoring and management guidelines for this, and detailing the content of proposed regulations that would come from CDPHE, and also the policies and guidelines. And then also specifically recommending pollutant concentrations and removal rates based on peer-reviewed research. And so the idea is that they're going to bring a national and statewide advisory group together and hammer out these details. We've got a framework already built from this other project that's been ongoing. But the idea is that you got to get down to the details and hammer this out. And so that would be that project there. 33D, Colorado Springs Utilities Homebuyer Landscape Outreach Program. And the great thing about this one is it really ties in with what Sean and Royal are doing. Colorado Springs wants to get all the new home buyers in their area, hopefully starting, they would like to start next year, take a several month time period where they have classes and pretty intensive trainings for new home buyers. And they're going to basically hit all the new home buyers in their area with information and bring them into classes and try to talk about sustainable landscaping, watershed health, stormwater issues in their town. Part of this would be to try to get tree and plant coupons as part of this as well from local nurseries to actually plant these things, because something that Colorado Springs has been running into since the drought, even since 2002, they've still got about 15%, I think, is the number of folks that are overwatering in their district. About 35% are kind of hitting the middle, but there's another large percent of folks that are not really they're severely underwatering as well. And a lot of the landscapes have gone to pot out there. So what they're trying to do is kind of, they're gonna yeah, no pun intended, sorry, but
might want to change that one just a little.
Yeah, how about they've degraded significantly. How about that? So the idea is to really bring up their new customers up to speed on the water issues in their statewide water issues, as well as the issues within Colorado Springs, and hit them. And so you've got this kind of nice segue from the project where people are looking to buy a house somewhere and they're getting oriented to some place. And then if they were to happen to come into Colorado Springs, then they've got a place where they hit the ground running with a good education program. So that's roughly it.
Great. Questions for Kevin? Seeing none, agenda item number 33, subsections A, B, and D have passed their initial review. Thank you. At this time, let's take a 10-minute break.
I know we can.
You're the last one. What's the board's pleasure? Continue on or break? All right, we're continuing on.
Mara.
Mara's pushing.
I'm ready. They had no way to back out. Good job.
See, where's last one? I am Mara McKillop for the record.
You were already up at the podium.
Yeah. already on
And
the
this is item 34A through I. This is the final consideration for these 9 grants that I presented at the September board meeting. There was no request for applicants to attend to address the board. There is one change, which is noted in the memo. One of the applicants, the Colorado Foundation for Agriculture, gathered additional cash match, and thus they have reduced their grant ask from $64,000 to $53,000. And that is the only change. These projects, these 9 projects, have a total grant ask of $608,000 or $8,805. And if approved today, there will be slightly less than $400,000 left for rounds 2 and 3. And I did a fairly detailed dive into each of the grants at the September meeting, so I won't go again into their description, but if there's no questions, I can just move through each for board vote.
No questions, please go ahead.
For agenda item 34A, the Arkansas River Basin, staff recommends approval for the grant amount of $24,350. Oh, sorry.
It's in blocks.
Oh, then do you want me to go through each one or just staff recommends approval of all 9 grants at their?
Actually, we have in the past. So
I've gone through, okay. 34B, staff recommends approval of the Colorado Cattlemen's Association for a grant amount of $76,200. 34C, Colorado Foundation for Agriculture, staff approves the grant request, recommends approval for the board of $53,000. 34D, the Colorado Foundation for Water Education, now changed their name to Water Education Colorado, and staff recommends approval for the grant request of $110,000. 34E, Colorado Open Lands, staff recommends board approval for a grant amount of $61,750. 34F, Denver Botanic Gardens is the applicant, and staff recommends board approval for a grant request of $44,750. 34G, the applicant, Geothermal Greenhouse Partnership, staff recommends board approval in the grant request of $174,500. 34H, applicant is the Open Water Foundation, and staff recommends board approval for the grant request of $54,000. And 34I, the applicant, One World, One Water Center, staff recommends board approval for the grant request of $10,225.
All right, any questions of Mara? That was pretty rapid there, so I'll let you kind of think about it here, and then we will proceed.
I do have one question.
Director Mitchell.
I do for agenda item 34D, with the name change of the foundation, does that go into effect for a grant application?
I'm not sure. I think on the accounting side, I think they haven't changed formally the Colorado Foundation for Water Education as their sort of legal name, and I think they're doing business as Water Education Colorado. So I think when we contract, we'll just make sure we have the correct name, but I don't think for the grant it has any challenges.
That was a very cool one.
All right, we have staff recommendation, agenda item 34, subsets. Director Hawkins.
I would move to accept staff recommendations on items 34A through I.
Moved by Director Hawkins, second by Director Gallagher to move staff recommendations, agenda item 34A through I. Further discussion? Call for the vote. All those in favor signify by an aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Great.
Item 35.
This is Mara McKillop, CWCB staff for the record. I will be presenting
item 35, items A through F. This is the initial consideration for these grants. The CWCB received 7 grants for the engagement and innovation category, and we moved 1 to the land use and conservation category, which you heard Kevin present. The remaining 6 have a total grant request of $261,730. Staff supports all 6, and if approved by the board in January, there will be approximately $130,000 left for round 3 in February. All these grants meet the education, outreach, and innovation measurable objective in Colorado's water plan, and many of them meet quite a few other objectives and goals in the plan, as well as goals from the basin implementation plans. So if there's no sort of general questions, I'll go through each one. Okay. Item 35A, the applicant is Colorado State University. The project name is Investigation of Barriers to Policy for Low Impact Development. The grant request is for $12,500. The goal of this proposed project is to identify barriers in adopting policies for low impact development for urban stormwater. The project will help promote innovation as LID is a new technology that can be used to bring the Colorado Water Plan goals to the stormwater sector. The applicant will be working with municipalities to identify barriers they face to adopting LID policies at the municipal level. The second objective is to identify steps to help municipalities overcome these barriers to promote responsible water management and sustainability across the stormwater discipline in Colorado. Are there any questions about this project? Item 35B, the applicant is the Mancos Conservation District. The project name is the Mancos Watershed Outreach and Data and School-Based Outdoor Learning Labs projects. And the request is for $81,250. The applicant has 2 projects within this application. The first is the Mancos Watershed Outreach and Data Project that will conduct outreach and education events to collect data from the community about watershed concerns and current education levels, and then create a report to guide next steps and future outreach efforts in the community and to identify priority actions. They will use a variety of outreach techniques to engage local partners and groups in the effort. The second project is a school-based outdoor learning lab that provides experiential education lessons to over 2,300 K through 8th grade students in Montezuma County, and it focuses on water conservation, and these experiential education lessons align with Colorado school standards. The project also includes an annual 2-day teacher training intensive for over 25 regional educators, and this helps gives them the tools to teach water lessons such as drought, conservation, and healthy rivers in their classrooms. It also includes a regional 3-day Ag Expo, which reaches over 500 youth, and they have a variety of learning stations around different topics related to ag and water and conservation.
Director Hawkins.
Risk of slowing us down, I just wanted to put a plug in.
We need pause there.
During my director's report, I talked a little bit about some of the activities of the Mancos Conservation District. So I wanted to remind the board, this is the type of work that they're engaging in both with the School to Farm program and with getting out and talking to the community about water plan implementation and other goals.
I guess one other maybe a comment is hopefully when we did the Colorado Foundation for Water Education, maybe we can send those folks a bunch of books down there and they can enjoy some of that too. That would be a pretty good pairing, it looks like to me. So,
yeah. Great. I'll move to 35C. The applicant is the Middle Colorado Watershed Council. The project name is the Colorado River Interpretive Center. The request is for $47,400. The applicant is creating a Colorado River Interpretive Center, which is actually already built. They're just taking over the building from the Chamber of Commerce in Rifle. And at this center, the center will be focused on educating the public on the Colorado River and its value to the residents of Colorado and the West. The project will design the educational programming for this center. It will start by conducting a stakeholder engagement process to identify the target audiences and determine a set of priority themes and messages for the center. It will then also design and create the actual displays and messaging and activities within the center. And then it will implement the actual programming by partnering with local groups and schools to create special events and educational opportunities in conjunction with the center. Next item, 35D. The applicant is the National Young Farmers Coalition. The project name is Training Young Farmers as Water Leaders through Colorado Water Law and Policy Boot Camps. The request is for $33,080. And the goal of this project is to educate young farmers and ranchers on state water law and policy. And they do this through a series of water boot camps. These boot camps are meant to empower young farmers to take on roles of water leadership. The project includes formalizing the boot camp curriculum from this past year, which was their pilot year, and then expanding producer access. They reached over 125 in the first year, and they'd like to expand. And they will do this through hosting 4 water boot camps in distinct regions across the state. They'll also enhance their online resource portal. And as part of this whole process, they work on engaging young farmers in the Basin Roundtable process.
Director Yon.
Mara, you're doing a good job.
I just try to get short and sweet and get through it.
I'm not familiar with this organization, and I didn't know if Director Stolp knew something about this organization. And then I wouldn't mind having them here, because some of the things that they're talking about here about conservation, efficiency, and reuse in agriculture, I'm just not sure how they're even defining those terms. So if there's any way that I could get some more information to kind of read through some of those things, because it would always makes me a little bit nervous when they're trying to educate people and I don't know what they're telling them. You know, I just, and are you familiar with them, John?
Dr. Stolp.
In some of the roundtable activity, I think in the Southwest. And then Sean Cronin and I were part of one of their boot camps here about a month ago. And so we talked a lot about Colorado water law. And the main constituency they have are probably what you call small acreage farming operations, enterprises, specialty type of crops, organic crops. And many of them are looking for an opportunity to farm. And so we talked a lot about access to water and that sort of thing. They had a lot of good questions. And so I think we're not only helping educate their constituency, but also the organization too. But I think they would probably look forward to the opportunity to come in and make a presentation at some point.
Thanks.
Yeah, I can reach out to them and connect them with you, Jim, for any specific questions. And then I can also ask them to come in January and address the board.
Yeah, let's try and have them with the board in January. So.
Okay, I will move to item 35E. The applicant is the One World, One Water Center at MSU Denver. The project name is Activating Colorado's Water Plan with Student-Driven Innovation. The request is for $40,000. And I apologize, I think in your data sheet, it says the total project cost, or the numbers don't match up. So the grant request is for $40,000. They have a cash applicant match of $10,000, and then the total project cost is $50,000. And so I think it's a little messed up in the data sheet, and I apologize about that, but we'll fix it. The One World, One Water Center at MSU Denver, CU Boulder, the Denver Botanic Gardens, and the Brendel Group are working together as a Colorado Water Collaboratory. This is a multi-campus competition that asks faculty and students to participate in pitching a project in their department that helps address an issue in Colorado's water plan. They did this project last year at MSU Denver, and so this year they are expanding to 2 campuses, and they'll have a competition at both CU Boulder and MSU Denver. So part of this project is to try to replicate and scale the model. The project includes creating and rolling out the competition, implementing the competition over a semester, and then evaluating and sharing the results. Okay. And then last,
Nice.
yeah,
Dr. Stahl.
so close.
I didn't quite understand their. I didn't quite understand what the competition was. What was their?
So last year's competition, they partnered with an industrial design class at MSU Denver, and they had the class design sort of more efficient and innovative rain barrels. And so they kind of learn about some of the water issues, and then each kind of project team comes up with design challenge for rain barrels. And then they went and they presented, and they had a panel of judges that came. They presented a couple different groups. So I think that's one example that they've used, but they can kind of expand that to a couple different types of things. So I'm not sure exactly which classes they're going to partner with this year, but I can get more information on that. But it's sort of an innovation challenge around a water issue.
Director Gallagher.
Kevin, do you, I think there was a question about how it dovetails. Kevin. Director Gallagher had a question about how the One World, One Water grant application around this kind of like competition dovetails with your water efficiency grant. And we haven't checked in on that, but I didn't know if you had any more info.
Yeah, we haven't. So the water efficiency grant you saw earlier today is the second phase of a collaboratory, and it's part of the idea. And we're trying to do a lot of things in these campuses, you know, kind of demonstrate large campuses and a lot of residential places that act like large campuses. So there's lessons we can learn from these places. But the other side of it, Tom always was big on, was including the students as well in this part. And we did include students in the first phase, and they'll be included in the second phase as doing work. But also the third part of this is to try to export some of the research that's happening on there and tie that to what water providers are doing. And kind of, it just seemed that there's a real big disconnect between some of the research that's happening on campuses and what water providers need, and then what water providers are actually doing in real life, and maybe what some researchers could benefit from. And so that's kind of where the students come in on that part of it as well.
Yeah, I think it's to take the sort of research and learning, and then share that. I know with the industrial design class, they went and presented a lot of their ideas to different groups to kind of showcase some of what they're doing. Yeah, so it's I think it's probably in the same sort of that Colorado Water Collaboratory umbrella, but they have sort of three pillars, and one is kind of this competition with students, and then the other is sort of in that water efficiency grant. Thanks, Kevin.
Further questions on agenda item D or E?
Would you like me to ask Tom Check to come to the board meeting, or were your questions answered around 35E? Okay. Great.
Earlier, is he?
Yes.
He have to leave? Or?
Yeah, I think he left. Okay. 35F. The applicant is the Roaring Fork Conservancy. The project name is the River Center Education Programs. The request is for $50,000. And the goal of this project is to turn the River Center, which is currently under construction, into a regional and state hub for watershed-related education, research, policy, and collaboration. The Roaring Fork Conservancy will provide field-based and in-classroom programs to students, field-based education programs for adults and families through their Watershed Explorations program. And this project will also increase the Roaring Fork Conservancy's communication efforts through a variety of tools. They will offer outreach experiences ranging from school field trips to college internships, community stakeholder meetings, to professional workshops, and teacher professional development opportunities.
All right, questions for Mara on agenda items, agenda item 35A through F. Seeing none, agenda item 35A through F has passed initial review. Thank you, Mar. Great. Good presentation. Good presentation from all staff members. That was, we're in kind of a learning curve here, but things seem to be working fine. So thank you. At this time, I think Director Mitchell has some comments.
So I know you all think I'm pretty cool and relaxed, but I'm actually very uptight. And you can ask some of the staff; they'll attribute that uptightness to me. That being said, some of the staff have taken it into their own hands, getting out and making videos and talking about the water plan and having a really good time with it. It's not part of our full strategic marketing plan, but it does happen. And we have some very creative people in the agency. I'm going to give a couple disclaimers before this video, which I wasn't willing to do during my director's report, by the way. And I got a lot of pressure about that, but I said, if we finish early, I'll do it at the end. So, but the disclaimer here is that the actors that were involved were not paid at any time that they were doing this. It was done on a Saturday. It was filmed by one of the actors' children's in one of the actors' basements. So that's about where we're at. But the messaging is the messaging of the film is very consistent with the messaging that we've had about the water plan the whole way through, being more than just words. And I don't know if you guys remember the song "More Than Words," but this is a remake, and it's pretty good. So go ahead and you can play it. I hope not.
Well, that was great. Any other comments, Director Mitchell?
No, thank you.
All right. Any board member comments? All right. We have reached the end of our agenda. I believe we are finished. I would entertain a motion that we adjourn.
Yeah.
Motion by Director Hawkins, second by Director Yan. Call for the vote. All those in favor signify by an aye. We are adjourned.